Hey, it's Martin from Cobbled Folk Revival, and I thought it would be fun to do a series of videos looking at popular books that contain descriptions of outdoor skills and do some demonstrations of the skills that are in those books. When I was a kid, I remember particularly reading the Little House books by Laura Ingalls Wilder, and sometimes the things that were described in the book, if I had never seen it before, I couldn't really picture it. And so at the very least, if you're reading these books and have a better picture of what's going on, I think it makes it more enjoyable. Or it may be that these videos showcase some things that you would want to practice yourself. And so I'll show you some things that are not necessarily described in the book, but things that have worked for me in case you want to try learning some of these skills yourself. So the first book that I was going to look at is My Side of the Mountain by Gene Craighead George. And this book, I had never read this when I was a kid. I only read it a few years ago after my friend Adam told me that this book inspired his love of the outdoors when he was a little boy. But a lot of people have expressed to me that this is a very important book to them. And I get a lot of questions from people about a handful of books, and this is one of the top ones. So one of the first skills that is described in this book is flint and steel fire. So on my copy, on page 10, as Sam is riding the train to the mountains where he's planning to live, he writes down these notes. A hard, brisk strike is best. Remember to hold the steel in the left hand and the flint in the right, and hit the steel with the flint. The trouble is the sparks go every which way. Okay. So I have here one of my flint and steel kits. So he talks about the steel. This is mine. And a piece of flint. So you've got a piece of flint with a good sharp edge. And what he's saying to do is hold the steel in the left hand, the flint in the right, and make your sparks. And so what's happening here when you make sparks off the steel is you're actually shaving off little pieces of your steel. And that's what the sparks are. And so it has to be carbon steel. Stainless steel won't work. But the carbon in the steel actually glows and burns for just a moment, and you can see how short-lived those sparks are. So the motion, though, is if you remember that you're shaving off pieces of the steel, it's kind of like carving, okay? And then you have to have something to catch the sparks. And so this is my tinder box. And in here, what I have in here is charred punk wood. And we're going to talk about other types of tinder here in a moment, but the punk wood is going to catch the spark, okay? And then you also need something to blow into flame. Now, in the book, pine needles are mentioned. I don't have very many pine trees that grow near me in Indiana. He mentions pine needles. He mentions the bark from a birch tree. That's another tree that I don't see a lot of except for in like decorative landscaping. But I do have with me in this little bag, I've got some bark from what we call a red cedar tree, and I've got some bark from a basswood or linden tree. And so that's what we're going to use to get a fire going here in a moment. And what I do with the bark, I'm looking for bark that's kind of stringy and fibery. And what I do is I just kind of pull those pieces apart. And so I've got some nice small thin pieces, because of course fire likes to grow from littler things to bigger things. So if you get it started on something that's nice and small and thin with a lot of surface area, that's going to be the best way to grow up your fire. Okay, so this is some of the basswood bark. Another name for the basswood tree that you might have heard is linden. The name basswood comes from a word in Old French that means fiber. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit more of this here. And then what I like to do is kind of like twist it and roll it, just to get the fibers like nice and separated as much as possible and kind of fluffed up, I like to say. Dropping a little bit. That's not the best thing to do. It's been raining every day for a few days here. And then what I'm going to do is make what we call like a bird's nest. I don't know if this is going to show up too well on the camera, but I'm just going to make a little nest to hold my fire. So I'm going to put that down. And I also have over here some sticks and twigs that I gathered up a moment ago. And these are, everything is damp. Everything. In the book, it describes collecting dead wood that's still on the tree, which is a good way to do it, and that's what I did. And even that wood is super duper wet. Hands off it. We've got everything all prepped. And so what I'm gonna do is exactly as described in the book. I'm gonna try to land some sparks on my, what he calls tinder. Okay. What I call char material. Okay, I landed one. And again, I'm not sure if you can see this real well, but it's starting to glow here when I blow on it. So I'm going to keep blowing on that. And I'm going to put that piece right in the middle of my bundle of dry bark. I'm going to even add a little bit more to it. Okay. And now I'm going to kind of wrap the bark around it. And just blow. Give it some air. So fire needs 3 things: heat, fuel, and oxygen. So we're going to feed it more oxygen until it gets hot enough to catch this bark on fire. Okay, now I've got fire, and I'm gonna even add some of the rest of my bark to this, just as a way to get a little more heat on this wet wood. And I'm gonna put my wood down just right on top of that, and let the fire dry those twigs enough so that they'll catch on fire also. You can hear that sound, that crack. That's old, dead, seasoned wood. If you're gathering twigs for a fire and they don't snap nicely, you might want to look for something that's been dead longer and is a little drier.